get that going. So I would like to introduce our first speaker for the night. Cheryl joined Nature Alberta's Board of Directors in 2022. She is actively engaged in Nature Alberta's Conservation Committee, fundraising development, and is Nature Alberta's representative for Worldwide Quest Eco Tours. Cheryl holds a Bachelor of Science in Conservation Biology and Management from the University of Alberta and has worked in the fields of ecological education, environmental interpretation, urban planning, and event management. She is also a professional artist with a diverse portfolio ranging from wildlife art to contemporary abstracts and expressionistic landscape paintings. Culminating her love of science and nature through artistic expression has always been a lifelong passion. Her work often mixes elements of her understanding of boreal forest ecology and the ethereal experience one gains from time wisely spent in nature. So with that said, Cheryl, I'll pass it over to you to get our presentation started.
Okay, thank you, Nick, for the introduction. So I'm going to be sharing with everybody our recent trip that we did with Quest Tours to Panama. So if you just give me one moment, I'm just going to get the slideshow set up here. Okay. Sorry. I'm just going to go to... Okay. Is that looking good on your end, Nick?
It is.
Okay. All right. So in late 2023, we partnered with Quest Nature Tours. They approached Nature Alberta to discuss us possibly doing an excursion with them where we would promote Quest Nature Tours through our membership, through our Nature Alberta membership. And we decided on Panama as our location. This was the first time that Quest has done a trip to Panama, but and also the first time I went to Panama. So yeah, it was Panama. And I chose this image from one of our participants as a sort of the juxtaposition between nature and the progress of Panama, although I think the common grackle is a very habituated bird everywhere in the neotropics, but I just love this image. So who is Quest Tours? So Quest Tours is very experienced. They've been around since 1970. They are committed to mindful, respectful, minimal impact travel. So we thought they would be wonderful to work with, and they truly were and are. So what you can expect from a Quest Tour, just give me a second here. I just have to, okay. Aim to contribute to nature conservation by providing travelers with the chance to experience wild spaces, learn about wildlife and natural habitats. And the tours are all exceptional in their educational nature experience, camaraderie, and fun. That was one of the quotes I took from their website. So what you can expect if you're able to join us on one of these tours is small groups, so 8 to 12 people max, expert leaders. So there's a experienced local guide who is a naturalist that has all the field experience in the area. And then myself, I acted as the liaison for our Panama tour. You'll have more time exploring, and I can attest to this. We had a very full itinerary. So we maximized our field time, but we also went at a relatively easy pace. It wasn't too exhausting, but we really got to see so much of the country. And best of all, you're all taken care of. So it was all inclusive. We stayed in wonderful accommodations. I don't think they missed anything on the accommodation side of things. Sorry. So, oops, missed a slide there. Why Nature Alberta? So through a variety of outreach programs, we encourage Albertans to learn about nature, experience nature, and protect nature. And we're a community protected by a love for nature. So even though obviously these excursions are not based in Alberta or about Alberta wildlife, they're an excellent opportunity for you to learn about conservation and interpretation and see what's happening in other parts of the world. So I guess, though, one of the #1 reasons we partnered was because it was an excellent fundraising opportunity. So a portion of the proceeds from the trip went directly towards Nature Alberta. And from this trip, we raised $7,000, which is a very nice chunk of change for Nature Alberta. you'll get to experience expert naturalists. So again, we had a top-notch naturalist on our trip, and you'll get to learn about conservation initiatives in other countries. So I got a lot out of learning about Panama's water conservation and how they are approaching looking at drought in the region and protecting biodiversity. And then, of course, you're going to be able to network with other like-minded individuals who love nature, whether it's birders or just people that are there to learn about the local culture and ecosystems. It was a really wonderful networking experience, especially given those small groups. So this is our group. We had 3 members from Alberta through that we got through the Nature Alberta network, but given this was the first time we have partnered for a trip like this, I mean, we didn't know what to expect. So we were very impressed that it filled up, and I guess there was a bit of a waiting list. So other members included other people who have done Quest tours before, and they all had very high references as far as their other trips have gone. And then we had some travelers who had never done a Quest tour or weren't members of Nature Alberta, and they came along and they were really interesting people as well. So it was a great group. Okay, and then here we have a few images of our local guides. So Richard Kaltung, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, or sorry, Calheel. He's from Anton Tours, which is a local Panama tour operator that so Quest contracted him, and he was incredibly knowledgeable. He was just a big personality, and it seemed like everywhere we went, people knew him, and he knew so much about the natural history and the cultural history. He was just amazing. We also had some local site guides. So this lady that's with Richard there, she was a local naturalist for over 20 years in one of the areas, and she was exceptional. And then, of course, we had Herman, our wonderful and very safe driver who toured us around the entire country. Okay, so the itinerary was full, and as you can see here, this is a list of it. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but we checked off a lot of the key highlights of Panama, and amazingly, everyone did really well on it. I felt like I couldn't keep up. And one of the main highlights for everybody was wildlife, of course. And yes, the Panama Canal was very cool, as was learning about the cultural and historic side of Panama. But everyone was really, really keen about the biodiversity and learning about the flora and fauna of the country. So I'm just going to share with you now a few different images that were collected. I have permission to share these photos from some of the participants on our site. So the first place we visited, and I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, Cebriania National Park and the Gamboa Rainforest Reserve. So this entire region of Panama is basically protecting the watershed that protects the Panama Canal. So there's no development in the area as far as logging or anything goes. They need to keep all that fresh water flowing into the Lake Gatun to keep it maximized for the economy, but they're also, as a side, protecting this huge swath of rainforest. So we spent three days at the Gamboa Rainforest Reserve and did local excursions from there. So here's another beautiful bird, the crimson-backed tanager. That was something to see with the bright colors. The yellow-throated euphemia. Oh, my favorite, slaty-tailed trogon. We got to see this at the Rainforest Reserve, just up from Pipeline Road, which if you're a birder, you probably know that site. And of course, there was lots of hummingbirds. So these are just a few more pictures of that area. The Choco screech owl, another wonderful little owl, and the only owl we saw in Panama. And you can see all our guests getting sore necks. And then we were taken on a boat excursion onto Gatun Lake, and this was absolutely fascinating, almost more fascinating than being at the like in the Locks region. We were right alongside the big cargo ships, and we saw so much diversity along this waterway, including Jeffrey's tamarin. Was the only time I got to see one of those in the wild, and of course the American crocodiles. And then we have the greater Ani here, who often, I guess, gets confused with the grackle, but you can see by its beak, it's a little bit more rounded. So a few more bird, and the wattled jacanas. And of course, these guys were kind of commonplace everywhere, the great Kissides. And here we have just a few images of our guests, and I would say they range from very avid birders, like that have big checklists. I didn't know what a twitcher was before this trip, but now I do. To people that were just novice naturalists who just wanted to be with other like-minded naturalists. So it was a good range. But again, our guide had all the equipment. So if you didn't have the big cameras or binoculars, he had the scope, and everybody got to take in the wildlife viewing. It was really exceptional. And here we have a little purple gallinule, which is a very cute little bird. And these guys were seemingly everywhere as well, the southern lapwings. All right, so from the rainforest region, we took here I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Piquerque. It's a dugout canoe to the Emberacara Indigenous village. And this was very interesting to learn about this Indigenous culture and how they're preserving that by doing responsible tourism. And we were able to speak with a gentleman who was involved in politics, and he was telling us about their role in the economy. And it was really interesting to visit this village. And then along that dugout canoe ride, we saw lots of birds along that river, the Gatun River. We saw this osprey here. And then I have a whole bunch of images of many of the birds that we just saw in that region. So, and a few more commonplace birds. Okay, so we went over to the Caribbean side, to the San Lorenzo National Park, and this area is a historic site, a World Heritage site, and at this fort, it was, I mean, there wasn't a lot of bird life, but what there was incredible. If you're familiar with the basket weavers, the crested or pendulas were absolutely remarkable to see, and they have a very beautiful sound. I have been listening to cowbirds recently because we have sheep, and I've noticed there's a similar call between the two of them, but definitely not the skill in nest making. And then from there, we went to the Miraflores Locks, and where our guests got to see the remarkable engineering of the Panama Canal. And the interpretive center there is wonderful. They have a great big modern museum with amazing exhibits. And then we got to learn about how the locks were built and how they move the ships through, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And from there, we went up into El Valle de Anton, which is literally the crater of an extinct volcano. And this was just a quaint little village where everybody really got to relax. We got a little bit of reprieve from the heat of the region, and it was just an absolutely tranquil, beautiful setting. This was one of my highlights of the trip, was this area. So we did several hikes in the region again, and we visited some of the local rural occupants, I guess people that are farmers. And one of the highlights was getting some fresh cheese from the local goat farmer. And we also visited this gentleman who's 96 years old and still making sugarcane juice. And it was absolutely incredible to see the pace of life there. It was very relaxing. And we did a day excursion to the Elcano archaeological site. So here we saw basically the remnants of civilization pre-contact. So over 1,000 years ago, this civilization existed, and they're still, what's the word? They're looking, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought. But anyways, they're still taking gold out and looking through the archaeological site, and it was really interesting to see. We kind of had to stay back, but it was also very, very warm in this area. So, but a few different birds from the highland region, a yellow-faced grassquit. And then when we got back to the valley, we finally saw a toucan, and this was actually the first time our group got to see one up close. So we had some very excited photographers. So this is some wonderful images of the toucan. And then, of course, there was lots of other wildlife, but most people were mostly avid birders, but I was really keen on seeing some of the insects and amphibians. So I made sure to include a few photos of that and the flora and fauna as well, just the diversity. The insects there. And here we have a coral snake and the American crocodile. And of course, all the monkeys and marsupials. And then after that, we went back to Casa Viejo, which is the historic center that the Spanish built in the 17th century after Henry Morgan, the pirate, pillaged the previous location or buildings. So we spent about 2 days here where we visited the we did a short tour of the historic sites. And then we went into the Metropolitan Park, which was absolutely incredible for diversity of birds. Again, we saw probably the most number of varied species on a single day was actually in this forested region of the Metropolitan Park. So we have some beautiful photos again from some of the guests and amazing panoramic views of the city from the trail and the mantled howler monkey. There was lots of those in that area. And then another highlight, the Biomuseum. So this is the first museum in the world designated to biodiversity. It's an absolutely phenomenal interpretive center, and it was designed by Frank Gehry. And then just a few images from around the city. And so what was learned? Nature's amazing. Learn about it and protect it. If you have the opportunity to go on an excursion like this, I would highly recommend it. I don't think it's something like, unless you're on a tour like this, that you can really take advantage of all the diversity that we saw, not just biodiversity, but just diversity of the country. So we learned so much about that. We learned about the amazing conservation initiatives that are happening in Panama and about the advocacy, because obviously, like anywhere, they have their issues with development and people are active. So that was very interesting to learn about. Just the shared experience of being with like-minded naturalists and being able to network. I know that several people from this group that are in locations near each other have been birding together and have gone out together since this trip. And then, of course, in the evening, we did a wildlife checklist and we would have a beer with that. And so that was another highlight of each day. So next up, we're going to do Jamaica in 2025. So if you're able to join us, Justin Peters, who's here, will tell us about that trip. And that's the end, Finn. And the word I was looking for was excavate. So there, I finally got it. That's just a highlight of Panama. I'm really, really glad we got to do this, and I thoroughly enjoyed the trip. So I can stop that share. There we go.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Cheryl, for those amazing photos and great stories.